platforms like this, where we're talking about it more, educating people about the usefulness of emotion. If we understand it from what I said earlier about it being data, then it's not this elusive, weird, I don't know what emotions are. If you have them, you're weak, which don't even get me going on that. But understanding it as data, then we move into a position where it's very, very empowering.
You're listening to My Evolved Life, a podcast that simplifies health and fitness and helps you maximize your life. My name is Vuna Nguyen, and I'm the creator of the Evolution Training System. We're so lucky to be living in the information age, meaning it's easier than ever to access information and find answers to any questions you may have. But isn't it confusing when you read information that's conflicting, or worse yet, just sounds wrong? I'll be sitting down with industry professionals to give you clarity and leave you with tangible actions you can take immediately to improve your physical, mental, and psychological health. Today's guest is Cinder Smith. Cinder is a registered psychologist with a master's in counseling psychology.
Yeah.
Cinder is also a member of the Psychologist Association of Alberta. Mm-hmm. She believes that taking care of your mental health is just as important as taking care of your physical health. And she also believes that everybody has the inherent capacity for growth, learning, and connection.
Yes.
She is a true advocate for mental health. Mm-hmm. So with that, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me, and I'm very happy and excited to be here.
I can see that. You're glowing already. We haven't started talking yet.
Right, yes.
So the other day when you and I were talking, mm-hmm. I could literally feel the enthusiasm through the phone. Mm-hmm. Where did this passion for psychology and mental health begin? Where did that journey start?
Oh boy. So I actually went to school originally to become a teacher. And during that process, in my undergraduate degree, I got to take a whole bunch of electives, and I chose psychology. And during that process, I started to really get curious about human behavior because it's everywhere. Mm-hmm. And I fell in love with psychology, with neuropsychology, the development of the brain, interactions with other people. And I took a giant leap of faith and changed my major from Bachelor of Education to a bachelor's in psychology. And here I am. And I've been practicing now for about 13 and a half years. And I continue to love what I do. And I'm just so grateful to be here to share my passion and to hopefully teach people a little bit more about mental health and the value and importance of it.
So when you say taking a leap of faith, mm-hmm. was that based on something?
It was based on this. So pop psychology these days talks about our intuition, our intuitive self. Okay. And I had this spidey sense that just got louder and louder the more I progressed in my studies. And that was my leap of faith to say, you know what? I'm going to do this. And I don't know what the hell I'm going to do with an undergrad in psychology.
Right.
But I'm going to do it. And then I knew after that I was going to need to pursue more education. And I love it. Everybody knows somebody who has mental health in their life, whether it's a friend or family. It's everywhere. And I just have such a huge passion in learning about it, and more so in teaching about it. And even further to that, also helping the people that I work with.
So just trusting your gut, and sure enough, 13 years later, here you are, right?
That's exactly it.
So can you tell us a little bit about what counseling psychology is?
Yeah, so it is basically, that's a hard question to answer, but I'm going to try to summarize. About learning somebody's background. It's about learning where they are currently and what is the presenting issue that's bringing them in for treatment at that time. People are very complex and come from a myriad of backgrounds. And so the counseling process is exactly that. It's a process, and it takes time, and it takes the right stage of change in order to really help someone with their growth and do some healing work if that's required. Sometimes it's just learning a new tool or technique, learning a style of communication, learning how to have healthier boundaries. there's just so much to it. And counseling really is just a process of helping someone through their journey and through their struggle.
You know, the fact that we are such complex beings is probably a fact that we don't appreciate enough. We think there's always black and white, but there's so much more than that, right? And such is the fact with mental health.
Yes.
Now, when I first reached out to you, there was a lot of reason behind it. Mental health is something that comes up on the show or on social media, what have you. It comes up all the time nowadays.
Yes.
But to get the opinion of a professional in the field, it will carry a lot of weight. Very, very important.
Yeah.
So with that being said, from the perspective of a professional, how would you define mental health?
Oh, boy. It's a really tough question. Mental health has many components to it. One of the ways that I like to teach people about it is how you're living your life, functional or not, because seldomly is it in the middle or gray. It is about having joy in your life. It's about having balance in your life. Mental health is about having access to healthy supports in your world. We are neurobiologically wired to be connected as humans. Even the biggest introverts of the world, we are wired for that. And so it's kind of grouping all of those together, looking at your physical health, your financial health, your relational health, your social supports, and kind of combining all of that together to really capture how well or unwell is somebody doing. Now, one of the things that I say to people is, you go and you see your family doctor if you have, a sore throat or a cold or something that won't go away. And they kind of look at you and they assess you and they write you a prescription for whatever that thing is, and you leave and go along your merry way. So they're trained to be able to assess you and look at you and figure out what you need for your sore throat.
Right.
And I talk about that similarly to mental health, is that I'm trained to see it. So when someone comes and sees me and sits in front of me, I'm already capturing a bit of a lens that I can see just by looking at them how well or unwell they're doing. So yeah, but that's taken a lot of practice and a lot of education to kind of get there. So mental health is, in essence, how somebody is doing in their life emotionally, relationally, and psychologically.
Such a big picture perspective, right?
Yeah.
It's not just any one individual component. Yeah. Now, you mentioned the word connection quite a bit. I think the word connection, it tends to be lost on us nowadays because social media gives us a perception of connection because you know what everybody's up to. Right?
Yeah.
So what is your stance on social media and how it affects the present state of mental health at large?
At large. Oh, I might get a lot of flack, and I'm okay with this.
It's okay.
I dislike it. I dislike the platform that people, not everybody, because there are some really great social media platforms out there. So I'm not going to say it's awful everywhere, but things like Snapchat, Instagram, and Facebook can really give people a misperception about someone's life. So I have a word that I use for Facebook, and it's fake book, because I don't really believe that everybody's putting their honest, unscathed, raw version of themselves out there. They're putting their perfect holiday, their perfect kids with their perfect outfits and their perfect, meal that they put together. And so in that realm, and I can say for sure in my own practice, people compare themselves on social media and it makes them not feel good. So they feel less than, they feel that comparative factor, and it's a breeding ground for mood-related issues, period. Yeah.
I think that a lot of people will agree with you there. Now, the way that you present it, it sounds as though people do show their highlights as opposed to their failures, so to speak. But I also find that especially nowadays, it just sounds like I'm saying this so much nowadays, but mental health is top of mind. Yeah. So you also have people who are airing all of their dirty laundry on social media as well. So you have both sides of the spectrum.
Definitely. Yeah.
What are your thoughts on that end?
Okay, so if I can just back up, the other piece I would add when I say fake book versus Facebook is the reality is that life is messy and everybody has hardship, varying degrees of it. Everybody's been through something that has either forced them to grow and learn and change or has kept them stunted. And so I feel like that is not what gets seen on social media because people don't really want to show that stuff.
Right.
But so to come back to your question about, you know, we can go to two extremes. We can be over here where it's the perfect beachy holiday and my makeup's perfect that day, or over here where I'm oversharing a lot of hardship and trauma inappropriately.
Right.
And over there, I would say the issue that I would raise in that realm is boundaries, and that people who are doing that type of stuff, I mean, there's lots of things that I could speak to in terms of where they might be at, but I would be starting at the lack of boundaries that people share when they're exposing way too much of themselves. Sometimes it's attention seeking. Sometimes they just want a lot of validation about where they are. But I have to be careful because sometimes that's a really big cry for help. There are times where people are sharing some real big, raw stories about themselves that they're really, really looking for someone to say, are you okay? And so, yeah. So my answer's kind of gray because in my world, I kind of live there. But does that make sense?
It makes absolute sense.
Yeah.
One of the things that I really enjoyed about our conversation was you make such a clean distinction that there aren't good and bad emotions. Yes. You talk about comfortable versus uncomfortable emotions. Can you break that down, elaborate on that?
I'd love to. So I have a lot of people in my practice who are very linear and logical thinkers, and I needed a way to explain emotion, to explain feelings to them, to help them make sense out of what was going on for them. So I love talking about this.
Great.
So there is a belief system out there and other people in my field potentially who talk about feelings and emotions as being right or wrong or good or bad. And I came up with the idea of them being comfortable emotions versus uncomfortable emotions. So comfortable emotions are these: joy, happy, content, peace, loved, needed, desired. And so when we experience those comfortable emotions, because that's what they are, they're more comfy than the other ones, that's giving us data that says, you know what, life is working well for you. Keep making the decisions you're making, the choices you're making, the habits you have, the people you're surrounding yourself with. Keep doing those things because it's working for you. You're getting a lot of comfortable data back to you. Equally as important to pay attention to the uncomfortable ones, but we don't like to do that as humans. So uncomfortable emotions being depression, anxiety, sadness, fear, worry, jealousy, anger, that kind of stuff. And when we experience those feelings, a lot of us want to numb it. We don't want to deal with it, or we want to avoid it. We want to retract. We want to do things like drinking, drug use, shopping, other forms of ways of not feeling it. But that information is equally as important. So when we have uncomfortable emotions, it's giving us data that says, you know what? Life doesn't seem to be working very well for you. Maybe it's your habits, maybe it's the people you're spending time with, the hobbies or the things that you're engaging in regularly that are leading you to feel more discomfort, more uncomfortable feelings. And so it's important to look at that. Another way, which I don't think I mentioned to you on the phone, is I've often talked about feelings or emotions. I use that word interchangeably, sure. I should say, that they're like road signs. So if I leave here today and I'm driving home on Deerfoot, and you know that kind of yellow diamond-shaped sign that says my lane's going to end in 500 meters. Emotions are like that. So I can either pay attention to that as I'm driving home, look at it, see it, okay, I'm in that lane, I got to get over, and go home get over and go home safely. I get home safe, everything's good. Or I don't look at it. And if I don't look at it, I might cut someone off, I might miss my turn off, I might not get home safely. So emotions are exactly that. They're either road signs or data, whichever way you want to look at it. But it's giving you information that's telling you life's either working for you or maybe not working for you. So it's really, really good tool to look at it. So that's why I love talking about feelings and emotions, is because we all have them. And if we're paying attention to them, we can craft and create a really good life.
The way that you present that is so interesting, because when we talk about just, let's say, decision making, we either make emotional decisions or logical decisions.
Yes.
And when it comes to logic is based on data.
Yes.
But you pose it as though emotions are data.
You got it.
Can be data. So what that leads me to believe is the quality of that data is predicated on your ability to interpret it.
Okay.
Right? So how do you best put yourself into a position to better understand what you're feeling, your emotions?
Okay, so here's an interesting thing. So I've done many talks before, and the kind of my opening statement is, how do we define emotion? So I'm going to start there, because people get that confused and complicated. They will put their hands up if I'm standing in front of a big audience and say, oh, it's when you're happy and you're sad. I'm like, well, it's kind of like trying to describe color. We can talk about pink, red, purple, blue, green, blah, 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 but it's really hard to define what's the definition of color. So same with emotion. It's really hard to define what is an emotion. So I break it down and say it's a combination between a physical response, because we have lots of physiology that occurs when we feel an emotion, and then it's our cognitions as well. So it's our interpretation of an event. It's our interpretation of something, or a perspective on things. So someone's happiness can look really, really different than somebody else's happiness. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I talk about it as a combo between our physical response when we're getting hooked by something, as well as what we're thinking about. That's kind of how I talk about emotion.
To me, that is a very interesting correlation that you make between emotions and colors. And I shared with you the other day my philosophy that one of the things hindering us when it comes to emotions is our lack of vocabulary. There are so many different words to describe your emotions, what you're feeling. However, we are very limited. We use something like, 6 or 7, angry, happy, sad,
That's right.
depressed. But there is a huge, huge spectrum between being depressed and being a little bit sad.
Yes.
Right? There's a huge spectrum.
Very much so.
Just like there is a huge spectrum between violet and purple.
There you go.
Right?
Yeah.
But because we don't understand that distinction, now personally, I believe that words are incredibly powerful. So the words that you associate yourself with are representative of what it is that you're feeling.
Yes.
So even though you may not be depressed per se, but you associate yourself with the word depressed, that immediately has very, very bad connotations and can lead you to be actually depressed.
Yes.
Do you agree with that?
Yes, I do. So are you talking about how we think about things?
Yeah. I think just association in general. So going back to depression, an individual may have failed a test. A very, very simple example.
Yeah.
But rather than being sad, they just associate themselves with being depressed because they did something wrong, where they jump to an immediate extreme because they don't know any words in between.
Yep. So one of the things, and just I love that you just use the word depression, because that's the other thing that I think we're getting better. But we need to talk about it more, because it's everywhere, it's out there. But the way that I like to talk about having an emotion, the difference between, I'm going to answer your question in a roundabout way.
That's okay.
The difference between a mood and emotion is very important for me to be able to answer your question. So an emotion, we experience many every day, all day, and that does not correlate to a diagnosis of bipolar disorder. People get that messed up a lot. But we can feel excited, we can feel sad, we can feel a little bit bored, we can feel calm. So we can have a lot of emotions that we experience in one day, and that's really normal for all of us. Mood is how often are those ones showing up and sticking around the most? Does that make sense? So again, coming back to comfortable and uncomfortable, if I'm having lots of comfortable ones, my mood is probably generally quite well. If I'm experiencing the uncomfortable ones, generally speaking, I'm going to have some sort of mood issue popping up. depression being one of those, and anxiety being a very close second. So now coming back to your question is that people like to, well, they don't like to, I shouldn't say that. They label themselves sometimes as being depressed. And I really like to separate a person from their mood versus their behavior. So I can behave in a way that someone might say, oh, she looks sad. And that's very different than depression. If I use the analogy of the emotion versus mood, same. So I can have an emotion where I'm feeling sad or I'm having an off day. That doesn't mean that I'm over here and it's with me too much, and so it's now my mood. Does that make sense?
It makes complete sense. So to summarize what I'm understanding, emotions are more what you feel, not necessarily in the moment, but it's more maybe short term.
There you go.
Whereas with mood, it is a result of a repetitive pattern.
Yes, it sticks around longer.
Right.
And
Makes
that's
complete
the
sense.
major distinction between having an off day, having an off week, and even you can have an off month. And that's different. I can be just off and sad and lonely and stuff going on, versus a mood is how long has that stuff stuck around. And that's where, as a psychologist, I really look at symptoms and seeing, are those symptoms present and how long have they been present? And that's really what distinguishes, kind of down and out and having a bad day or week or month versus it's sticking around longer, and that's going to look more like depression.
Right.
Yeah.
So let's take a moment and really talk about what you do. There is whether it's a myth, misconception, a truth,
Yeah.
you tell me. But when you think psychiatrist, what do you think? You think lying on a couch, the professional sitting there
Yes.
with a clipboard, being very judgmental or writing everything
Yeah.
down. What is your practice like? What do you do on a day-to-day basis?
Okay, so I'm just gonna, because my profession will require me to distinguish this.
Sure.
So psychiatry
Yeah.
is different than psychology.
Okay.
So psychiatry is really more about symptom management and medication. So they are rock stars in their field in terms of really understanding the psychopharmacology of human behavior. My world is more focused on the day-to-day behavioral stuff and helping people live more functional lives. And I know it sounds so cliche and a little bit cheesy, but I really have a philosophy in my practice. Are you living your best self? And that's not a maybe. It's either yes, I am, or no, I'm not. And generally speaking, what I say to people when they come into my practice is, you're here because something's not working. And we need to figure that out together. So the process in my practice is around people's functionality. So really assessing that. And I get down to brass tacks, like how's your sleep? How's your appetite? How's your exercise? Who are your supports? And then really teasing out, what's the thing that brings you here? What's the thing that isn't working in your life right now? We got to figure that out. And I really, in my practice, do a didactic experience, particularly in my first consultation with people, to really get a good grasp and picture on how well are they doing big picture. I don't want to just talk about the thing that brings you in to see me. I want to know all of these other areas, because I really believe that people have, no matter what they're going through, hardship and all, they have a set of strengths. So I try to tap into that too.
Right.
Yeah.
So I want to ask you a more difficult question. I believe that people inherently are good and we want to help. But when it comes to mental health, being able to help means that you have the tools to be able to identify when
Yeah.
somebody is suffering.
Right.
So having dealt with so many clients, you would call them clients,
Yeah.
what are the telltale signs, the very, very obvious indicators that there may be something wrong and they need help?
Oh boy. I would come back to my previous answer in terms of their functionality. So how are they doing on a day-to-day regular basis, and really looking at, sleep, appetite, exercise, supports. How are they doing relationally? How's their employment, their job, their workplace, their finances? And a big one that gets missed, and I ask every single person who comes for a first consultation, what do you do for fun? And it's funny but not, because if I have a long pause between my question and someone's answer to that, I'm going to be right there because it's a problem. If you can't access 2-3 quick things that you do for fun in your life, that's a problem.
Right.
So it's really kind of looking at everything. But if someone's going to sit across from me because they're making an appointment, I'm coming back to the doctor analogy too. They wear it. They look like it. They look like they have something bigger going on because, again, through 13 years of doing this, I can see when they're getting better. They'll walk in and they'll sit down. They'll be a little bit lighter. They'll make eye contact with me and just be more cognitively engaged in the process. And yeah, I can literally see that shift in people. So just as much as I can see them when they're not doing well, I can see them when they're doing well as well.
Makes complete sense.
Yeah.
I do apologize because I know that was a tough question, because a lot of people are good at hiding it as well.
Yes.
And like you said, you have to observe their patterns, their relationships.
Yes.
But that's also predicated on you seeing the person regularly, right?
Yes.
So unless it's somebody who you're very, very close with, and again, see them all the time, it's going to be very hard to pick them apart based on their social media posts or what have you, right?
Yes, very much so. Yeah.
So one of the things that we talked about was communicating with children, communicating the importance of mental health, communicating how they should articulate their emotions.
Yeah.
Let's talk about that.
Yeah. So we've come a long way. I think that now what is happening in the schools is actually in my neighborhood and a few other schools that I'm attached to. The discussion about the importance of self-regulation, emotional regulation in the classroom. And if there was any place, and I'm just going to back up and say that I don't work exclusively with kids because I can't turn it off. So my practice involves adults only and a few adolescents in there just to keep it fun.
Yeah, of course.
But the little guys, that's where we need to be teaching this stuff. If I could put it in classrooms, if I could put it in the curriculum, that's where I would go in terms of teaching young kids about mental health, about emotion, because that's all they are. They live in emotion. And they do because their frontal lobe of their brains in all school-age children is still developing. And why I highlight that is because that is the part of our brain where we're really good problem solvers. That is where impulse control comes into play. So hence those little toddlers that have their little tantrums.
Yeah.
But the frontal lobe of our brain also allows us to have executive function and good thinking. And so if you imagine that, you've got a young child who doesn't have that part of their brain developed yet, but has oodles of emotion, but doesn't know what to do with that. And so my belief and philosophy about kids and feelings is talk about them, let them have them, don't shut them down. We're very quick to do that because they can get on our nerves.
Sure.
As a mother, I can say that. And I also think that we have to have oodles of patience to teach kids about emotion and about feeling, but to not take it away. I often say, be careful that you're not hijacking your little ones' feelings because they need to have them. They need to learn about them. It's our job as parents to teach that. As a psychologist, I think it's even more important because if we can do that with them, we're going to have a future of adults who are emotionally intelligent. And I might get some flack for this too, and I'm okay with it, but I really believe that emotional intelligence supersedes intellectual intelligence. And I say that because we can learn anything. We can go to schools, we can read, we can be taught a whole bunch of stuff. Emotional intelligence is super hard to teach.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm still 13 years doing it, and there's still a lot of learnings I'm doing with it too. But does that make sense?
It certainly does. And emotional intelligence is one of those not funny things. It's very, very important. But I find that when we refer to emotional intelligence, we are referring to our ability to understand other people's emotions.
Yeah.
But we don't talk enough about understanding our own.
Our own.
Right? So
yes.
an emotional self-intelligence and emotional self-awareness, right?
Yes.
I feel like we're lacking that a lot.
Yes.
And maybe because there is such a stigma around emotions.
Yeah.
Where do you think that stigma comes from?
people don't want to talk about those things. They don't want to talk about that. I'm coming back to social media too. They want to talk about the comfortable life, the comfortable life where it's happy and easy and blah, blah, blah. But we don't, I should say we're getting better. Yes, we're getting better. The Bell Let's Talk movement has drastically changed our ability to talk about it now, which I love it. And I'm so happy that they have a platform to do that, because when we talk about it more, we dispel a whole bunch of the myths that are around mental health. That if you have so one of them being, if you have a mental health issue, you're in some way broken. Or if you have a mood disorder, or even bigger than that, a personality disorder, there is something inherently wrong with you. Whereas I like now, we're getting better. We're not where I want us to be yet. Talking about it more and removing labels that keep people in those places. I don't know if I'm really articulating that great, but it's the more we talk about it, the more comfortable people get with it. In the last, I'd say probably 2 to 5 years, celebrities talking more about it. I mean,
yes,
people sharing with the world, particularly celebrities, because those are ones that I think a lot of people misperceive that they're doing great and well in life, and a lot of them are not.
Anthony Bourdain, that was a huge one.
My gosh.
Love him.
Yes, definitely. And even just what was that movie that just came out with Lady Gaga and Bradley Cooper? I'm forgetting the name.
Star is
yes.
something?
A Star is Born.
Star is Born.
Beautifully represented mental health in general and addiction. And people loved it. People ate that up because that's what's in people's lives. Does that make sense?
It does.
And so I think the more we talk about it, the more we dispel some of the major misperceptions about what mental health is all about.
Talking about it. Now, I'm maybe asking you a little bit of a leading question, which I don't mean to do. But talking about it, is there a right way and a wrong way? Like, there is, in my opinion, a difference between talking about your emotions and just venting.
Yeah.
Where do you draw that line?
That's a really good question. Talking about them, so from a clinical perspective, oodles of research that supports when we talk about it, 2 things from a healing perspective can happen. One is we literally are externalizing something. So we're taking something from here, more importantly from here, and getting it out. There have been many times in my practice where someone will say, I feel so much better because now I've said it out loud. So there's that piece. And then a kind of a close second to that is when we talk about something, we take away, I'm going to use this funny term, but we take away the scariness of it.
Okay.
So to talk about it, it's like, let's just throw that out on the table, unpack it, look at it, and get real and raw with it. And lots of people really like that. In my world, in psychology, we talk about that being normalizing. So when we normalize someone's problem and pain, it dissipates it just a little bit. Now, you're right, because on the flip side of that is venting. And venting can be healthy and helpful when we do it right, because yes, there's a right way and a wrong way, because when we are doing too much of it, we're not managing that emotion in a healthy way. If anything, we're probably fueling it more. The way I like to talk about it in my practice with people is there's a very different method between reacting to an emotion, which requires very little, if any, cognitive thought, versus responding to an emotion.
Right.
Responding to emotion requires you to be in it, sit with it, get curious about it, and then think about, what is this all about? Where is this coming from? We do a lot of this. People
Impulse.
do
Yep.
a lot of that and mislabel their emotion or manage it in a really unhealthy way.
So again, on that same train of thought, talking about it, I know emotions, we've been kind of talking about this already. Emotions are treated as taboo, so to speak. And there is a lot of shame around it, embarrassment around it. who, again, going back to your clients, the ones that have outlets, people to talk to, who are those people generally? The reason I ask this question is because some people are just, they feel like they have no options, nobody to talk to.
I know.
Who are the first people they should go to? And I do understand that it's circumstantial. It's not going to be the same for everybody.
Yeah, it's not going to be the same for
let's
everybody.
generalize.
Yeah. So are you talking about somebody who's coming to see me or in general? Someone who's just struggling with mental health.
That's correct.
Or something going on, but I'm not sure what it is.
That's correct.
If you're lucky and you have healthy supports in your life, and that can be friends, family, your partner, those people, if those people can be in your corner and listen to you and hear you, and you feel comfortable enough to confide in them, I would say those people. If you have a family doctor that you have a good relationship with, they're also a really good, I call it your nucleus. So if you have a good nucleus of people in your life, or tribe, kind of use those words interchangeably, that's your support network. Those are the people you should go and talk to. If you don't have that, it's about, well, probably coming and seeing a professional like myself, and then you build one. You create one. I was serious when I said earlier, we are wired for connection, all of us.
Right.
And so you don't have to have a huge nucleus, a huge network, but you need to have a few people that you can turn to and talk to when life gets hard and messy.
Right. So we've used this term a couple of times, proactive.
Yeah.
Right. This is one of those topics that does come up again and again, whether it's physical health, mental health, psychological, what have you. But we wait until we're at the brink.
I know.
Right? And I'm sure you experience that all the time.
Yeah.
How do we begin to get ahead of it? And when should we actually be going to see a professional?
Right. Love that question, because you're right. People often come in when things are really bad. And I love to tell people and teach them, I want you to come in when they're kind of sort of starting to feel like they're off. And not everybody has the same level of self-awareness. If they have lots of it, they're going to catch, I call it catching yourself on the fall, right? So if you're going to catch yourself on the fall and you've got lots of awareness, you're going to get yourself a little bit sooner. Does that make sense?
It does.
Versus if I'm not really self-aware, I'm maybe a little bit foggy, I'm probably going to be closer to that kind of tipping point of that drop and not catch myself. So again, I'm coming back to the functionality of your life. If your sleep is off, if your appetite is off, if you're noticing that your mood is a little bit shifted, or you're more impatient than you normally are, if you're not engaging in the things that used to bring you joy or happiness, those would be some big red flags to be paying attention to. The other distinction that I make is sometimes we can have situational stuff that impacts our mood. So if someone passes away that we love, naturally we are going to show signs of depression. That doesn't mean I'm depressed. That's, acute grief in the moment. So I don't always just land on a diagnosis based on that, because I want to know what else has been going on for somebody. So just because you are crying every day and can't get out of bed and not eating well, doesn't mean you're depressed. It means, well, you're still in that grieving stage of the loss that you've experienced. Do you see what I mean? So someone has to have a little bit more, I would say, awareness to catch themselves before they really drop. Right. But if you can, I guess that's what I would be hinging on.
Again, going back to those definitions, right? That also takes the understanding that there is a difference between grief and depression.
Oh,
the
time.
Definitions between the two, right?
Yes.
And if I take just one thing away from this conversation, it's going to be that there is a massive difference between mood and emotion. That's huge. I want to go back to something you said earlier when we were talking about communicating with kids. You mentioned the term emotional regulation.
Yeah.
Can we talk a little bit about that?
Love to.
How does one regulate their emotions?
Okay, so there's a big pop word in psychology and out there these days about mindfulness. Mindfulness is all about the now. It's about being very, very present. Emotions have the ability to take us out of the now, or the opposite. We also, when we experience strong emotions, seldomly are we being cognitive about it. So that's when I come back to reactionary versus responsive. So self-regulation, emotional regulation, lives over here where we are responding to an emotion. So to do that, sometimes, and I literally teach people this, when you have a strong emotion and you're feeling something very, very profound, I usually go with anger because that's the one that's out there. Like, I'll speak to that in a second. That if I'm feeling angry, I get people to do the opposite. So you really want to be activating your parasympathetic nervous system. So that's diaphragmatic breathing, sitting down in a chair, getting, kind of the belly breaths. And then once you're there, and once you've been able to control your heart rate and your breathing, you can then tap into the cognitive side of things and say, what's going on here? What's going on for me? How have I been hooked? What was I triggered by? Get curious about it. You can do more with it, and you can regulate yourself. You can be able to have a hard, strong emotion, but it doesn't get messy.
Yeah.
So with anger, I love talking about it because there's nothing wrong with it. It's normal. We all have it. Every single one of us experiences anger because that's over here with uncomfortable emotions. The problem with anger is what we do with it. Does that make sense?
It does.
So I can be angry. All of us get that, but it's what we do with it or what we don't do with it. And most people grew up in homes and families and watched it being managed in an unhealthy way. So then observational learning is huge for kids and as well as for adults. Then we take that forward, and that's how we engage. So I love talking about that as well and helping people regulate themselves when they are angry.
I think it's very important to make the distinction that when you say regulate, you don't mean avoid.
No.
Right?
Good distinction.
I think that is very, very important to say because it may be perceived that way, right? By controlling our emotions, we choose to either confront them or avoid them. That's not the case. There is a very fine medium.
Right.
You can. It's not necessarily gray, but you are. The reason I say gray is you're doing your best to control something that is relatively uncontrollable.
Right.
Okay. Going back to kids.
Yeah.
I love that you're so passionate about communicating with them. Now, I am curious. We like to make the male-female distinction.
Yes.
There are male behaviors, female behaviors. And I assume that also correlates to male emotions and female emotions, right? How do we get away from that? Because emotions are emotions.
Yeah, we all have them, whether we're female or male. We all have them. So I love this question, and I could babble on for hours about it, but I'll try to be succinct. Males, and we're getting better, but we're nowhere near where I want them to be, are generally socialized to keep their emotions in check. You guys are socialized to not have as many, or if you have them, don't show them, right? Boys don't cry, suck it up. But you have one emotion that you're very much socialized to express. And what do you think that one is?
Anger.
Anger.
Yeah.
Yeah, nailed it. Females, if I can be very primitive, and this goes way back in my early psych class days, going in the archives, we are wired to have babies. We are wired to be emotionally attuned, very much so that we can hear and understand our babies. Babies only communicate through emotion. That's it. So understanding a baby's cry allows us to respond to them. So females, and I'm being very global, and it's not this way now, but we're getting better. Females are socialized to have a lot of them, and they are socialized that it's acceptable to express them. I'm not saying that's right or wrong. It's, I guess, an observation. I think the way that we move away from that is platforms like this, where we're talking about it more, educating people about the usefulness of emotion, if we understand it from what I said earlier about it being data, then it's not this elusive, weird, I don't know what emotions are. If you have them, you're weak, which don't even get me going on that. But understanding it as data, then we move into a position where it's very, very empowering, where we can have this discussion, males and females, about what emotions am I experiencing right now. And I think if we can start doing more of that and understanding emotions from that place, then we can make an even bigger shift in mental health.
Going back to mood and emotion, I'm not suggesting that we need to change our emotions. If you're sad, then you're sad, right?
Yeah.
If you're going through a period where your mood isn't as positive, that's okay.
Yep.
But what are the things that we can do? What are some habits that we can undertake or employ to influence our mood and emotions in a positive manner?
Yeah.
Whether it's putting yourself, surrounding yourself with positive people or what have you.
Yeah.
What would you suggest?
Yeah. So I have a really big a phrase that I use a lot, both in my professional life and my personal life, is what you think about, you bring about. And so be very careful about where you land your thoughts on a regular basis, because it has a lot of power in your life. Habits, though, that create healthy mental health, sleep hygiene we talked about earlier, eating regularly and eating healthy, having healthy supports in your life, people you can go to, exercise, huge. I work with a lot of people who will come and see me and they'll say, Cinder, whatever we do, I don't want to be medicated. And I'll say, okay, well, that's fine. But I might put that in my back pocket for down the road if we have to have that conversation. But I'll say, then you better be moving a lot, because exercise is the number one way to combat mental health naturally. Moving 20 minutes a day, every day. I have a phrase I use in practice as well: to get out of your head, get out of your house. So that stuff. And then fun. What do you do for fun? What are you doing on a regular basis that brings you joy? And without it sounding super cheesy, but what fills you up? What is soulful in your life that makes you feel like this is awesome? Because we get one shot at this crazy thing called life. And if we're not having a lot of fun along the way, that's a problem. So it's a combination of like some of those physical things, and then relational stuff. And then what are your hobbies? What are the things that you love to do on a regular basis? So that would be my starting space for somebody.
I like that a lot. And it's a good reminder as well, though, that fun is subjective. Fun is going to be different from person to person. And it doesn't have to be this grand activity.
Nope.
You don't have to hit the mountains just to have fun. It could be something as simple as doing a crossword, I assume.
There you go.
Right?
Yep, that's it. And it's a combination of what gets you out of your head or your stress, and what's lighthearted and just something that isn't complicated. I will openly admit I have this huge obsession with Ellen. I think she's an amazing human.
We're going to tag her in this.
Right? Perfect. Because she says at the end of every single one of her shows, be kind to one another. And I love that. But I also love like the little games she plays with all of her guests on there. And sometimes that's what I do for fun. I just watch a whole bunch of like silly little Ellen clips because it's funny and it's lighthearted, and it isn't this heavy, hard stuff that life throws us. But yes, you're right. It doesn't have to be this big, grandiose thing that you do that's for fun, like go to Disneyland. It could be just what's some small activity for 15 minutes that you're doing every day that fill you up, that make you laugh. That I don't think we laugh enough. I think humor is something that's really, really important that we move away from right now too often. I think we're really serious. I think this economy is bringing on a lot of hardship.
Sure.
And I'm not saying don't address it. I'm saying the opposite. Address it, but park it sometimes and remind yourself that life is also really awesome and really fun. So don't always live over here and dealing with the hardship that life can throw at us.
I can tell that you're very, very passionate about this. But I also sense that you're very optimistic as well. You're getting more optimistic about just human beings in general.
Yes.
Would you say that at large we're progressing in the right direction when it comes to mental health?
Yes, I do. I believe that we are. I know it sounds so cliche, but I believe that we're talking about it more and we're sharing it openly with each other. I go down to I speak at, it's called Mommy Connections. It's this mom's group in the south of Calgary, and I speak.
We know them.
Oh, perfect! Shout out. And I love going down there, and the more we talk about it, the more we talk about the realness of motherhood and having babies and the messiness. The group of women that connect with each other there, because it's real and it's raw, and they're like, oh, great, we can talk about how awful this is. I mean, we love our kids. I'm joking, but it helps to move away from that stigma, and it helps someone feel like they're not alone. They're not the only one suffering. And so I think doing more of this, I think, there a lot of things need to change, but we're for sure going in that direction.
It's really community, right?
It's community. Yeah.
It's sometimes it's kind of a buzzword, but community at large is very, very important. And community is as simple as just people who are like you, right? Who don't necessarily share the same philosophies, but they're going through the same things, right?
And it's funny because I get it all the time. As soon as somebody, if I'm at a Christmas party or meeting the neighbors, whatever, as soon as somebody knows what I do for a living, it's awesome when they come forward and they say, I have a quick question. I'm like, well, I'm not on duty right now, but okay. But I love it because if you feel comfortable enough to come forward and talk about it, I'm going to talk about it and I'm going to answer any question. And so I think I just have such a passion for it, and I have a passion for helping other people and bringing forward that you don't have to be suffering in silence anymore, and you don't have to think that you're the only one that's going through something hard.
One of our previous guests said something that I thought was so profound. He said that comparison is the thief of joy. So going back to social media, we are always in a habitual state of looking at other people, what they're doing, their accomplishments, or what is perceived to be their accomplishments, because that's what they put out there. How do we get away from that? How do we put ourselves in a position where we just don't care what other people are doing? And what they're accomplishing, just more focusing on the self?
Wow, that is a really good question. How do we get away from it? Am I allowed to swear on the show?
You can if you'd like.
I'm such a people that the beauty with aging is my give a shit factor has gone way down.
That's hardly a swear, by the way. That's fine.
Okay, good. I could drop another one, but I won't. I'll just shelf that one. But yeah, so it's like teaching someone how to do that and focusing more on themselves and less on what other people, because let me tell you, in my practice, the ones that show up that look perfect, you've usually got some huge stuff going on. So that picture that you see when you're on Facebook or Instagram or Snapchat or whatever, I would invite people to have a bit of a different lens and say, is that really what's going on? And maybe not to worry so much about what other people are doing. Spend more time focused on yourself and harvesting your own relationships and your own habits and progression in your own life, and you move away from how much that matters. Does that make sense?
It certainly does.
It's a really hard thing to do. In fact, I was talking about that with another professional the other day. It's like, how do we help people use social media in a healthier way and less exactly as like a thief of joy? When we look at someone else's seemingly perfect life and we feel smaller about ourselves, that's a problem. Like I've literally given the homework to many clients of mine, social media cleanse for 30 whole days. I don't want you on there. I don't want you looking at it. I want you to take it off your phone and see how you feel after 30 days. And again, I'm not saying it's all bad, because there's some stuff that I follow and I love and it's great, but it's stuff that when I look at it, it doesn't make me feel small, or it doesn't make me feel like I'm not progressing. So that would be another invitation for folks, is to, whatever you have, whoever you're following, make sure, is that bringing you more joy or less in your life? And if the answer is less, get it off. Like, period. I have a kind of a very firm line with that. And so if it isn't something that makes you feel good about yourself or contributing to your own wellness, remove it, period.
100%.
Yeah.
I believe that so much of it comes down to perspective.
Yes.
Right? Perspective is so huge. We don't get enough of it. We don't think enough about it. I'm sure you know who Gary Vaynerchuk is. One of the things that he says that I fully live each and every single day is with the mindset and philosophy that if you're living in North America, you're in the 99th percentile.
Yes.
In terms of quality of life.
Yes.
I mean, yes, we still go through things, but are you eating every day? Do you have shelter over your head?
That's right.
You know, there's a lot of other things that could be plaguing your life. You know, are you able to move? Do you have the option to move?
Freedom.
The freedom.
Yeah.
For the majority of us, the answer is yes. So perspective. Can you talk a little bit about that and how that ties into the emotions? I know that's kind of an offset kind of question, but
yeah. So just perspective in general and
how does it influence emotion?
So I'm going to come back to the phrase I said earlier about what we think about, we bring about. And so if you think about this for a quick second, it isn't random that you wake up in the morning and you have some healthy thoughts. I'm going to have a great day today. I'm going to focus on things that I'm grateful for and bring me joy. So you leave the house and you get a string of green lights on your way to work. You get to the office door and someone's there to open it for you. Your favorite cup of coffee is sitting on the corner of your desk because your teammate left it for you, whatever.
Right.
That, I believe, is the lens that we can choose to have to change how we feel. So perspective being, where's my lens? Where are my thoughts? Where do I go? Versus, I hit snooze, my cat is sleeping on the floor and I tripped over her, and my coffee maker, well, that sucks today, and I hit all red lights on my way to work, and I get there and I'm irritated, and same. That my lens is looking at everything that's not working, everything that is wrong or bad or whatever. But both of those come down to how we think about things and where we decide to put our lens. Because like I said earlier, and I'm old enough to say this, that life is hard and life is messy, and all of us get given something that we need to work through. And we can either choose to play victim, and there's no growth there. There's no growth in laying down and saying, poor me, and why is this happening?
Right.
There's growth when you say, what is this supposed to teach me? Where am I going with this? Why is this showing up in my life? It's showing up to teach me something, and I got to look at it. And when you can look at it and have the thought, perspective that no matter what, I'm going to be okay, you will be okay.
Right.
If you have the thought and perspective that I don't know if I can do this, and I might break and I might crack and I might not work out, it's probably going to go that way too. So I could spend a half an hour talking about this because I really believe, and I'm not immune from hardship myself, but where do you want to put your lens? How do you want to look at something?
Right.
And again, your people, your tribe, your nucleus, when things are hard, do you have people around you who are going to say, you know what, I believe in you and you can get through this, even if you don't think you can at that time.
Right.
Yeah.
As you explained that, I can just see that there's so much correlation between perspective and mindfulness.
Yes.
Because unless you are present, are you going to notice that you had a string of green lights?
There you go.
Or that your coworker left you a cup of coffee?
Yeah.
You may not even notice that's happening, right?
Yes.
And I think mindfulness is one of those things that is becoming more and more difficult with technology.
Yes.
Because you know what? There are a lot of people, and sometimes myself, where I get separation anxiety when I don't have my phone next to me. Right?
Yeah.
So
definitely,
it's tough, but we will get there.
We will get there.
So it sounds like you are just chock full of clients now. With clients nowadays, you're doing a lot of different things. You're doing keynote speeches. What is next on your radar? What is next on the horizon?
Oh, part of me was like ambivalent about sharing it, but I will. So in the fall, I was invited to apply for a TED Talks. And so that application has been submitted. So I'm waiting on that, which the reason why I'm so excited for it, if I get this opportunity, is I get to share with thousands of people my beliefs around emotions and mental health and where we are going with it. So that's a thing over here.
Okay.
I'm also working on furthering my education. I'm not quite ready to share that piece
That's
of
okay.
where I'm going, but I really want to start taking this whole myth about mental health and kind of what happens behind closed doors and bringing more light to it and sharing it with more people. And I see myself doing that still in my practice. I don't think I'm going to give that up for a long time. I know some psychologists who have moved away from the clinical work and they're doing other things, but I still want to do that. That's where my heartthrob is, working one-on-one with people. But the other piece is moving into more of a public platform and talking more about it, coming and doing this, and a few other areas in Canada that I will be going to and speaking at big events. That's kind of where I'm going for 2020.
That's great.
Yeah.
So first, I want to say that not only do you deserve to be on that stage
Thank you.
TEDx YYC, I'm looking at you. I want to tag them.
Perfect.
They would be doing the audience a disservice if they didn't put you on that stage.
It's very kind of
because
you.
this is such an important topic to talk about for so many reasons. There are so many layers to it.
Yeah.
Based on what we've talked about today and in other conversations, you are the right person for it. You are very, very passionate about it.
Yes.
And with something this large, you do require a very passionate force behind that change.
Thank you.
So, that being said, somebody's looking for your services.
Yes.
How do they find you?
So my practice is Smith Psychological Services. I have a website they can access. There's a form on there they can fill out. There's my contact information, email, phone number. It's pretty easy. They can Google me. Psychology Today is a magazine where lots of psychologists are on there. I invite people to really, not just me, I don't want to just speak for my own practice, but one of the most important things about your therapeutic journey is your relationship with the person you're going to work with. Having really good rapport, being a good match and a good fit is so key. If you're going to absorb the information, if you're going to take home tools and learn how to do that, you need to be with somebody who you feel comfy with. And so it doesn't need to be obviously me, but anybody who is seeking therapy, I strongly invite that to be a really important piece. And there's a lot of us out there, and there's a lot of us who offer a free 10 to 15 minute phone consultation to say, kind of get a general feel or vibe for that connection. But I would strongly invite people to do that.
So knowledge, of course, is very important, but rapport almost
Huge.
supersedes it.
Yes.
So for people looking for you, it's Cinder, Cinder.
Yep.
It's not intuitive.
No, and it's so funny because I get all the time, it's like, is that short for Cinderella? Like, I love that, but no.
I promised myself I wasn't going to do that today.
So it's all good. People ask me all the time. I'm like, nope, it is not.
So to make this a little bit easier on people, I know Google is a big thing, but fortunately or unfortunately, people do look for services on social media as well.
Yeah.
What kind of credentials are they looking for? Like, do you have...
So what's really important for a kind of a logic and a finance purpose, and I don't know if I'm wording that right, is if you have benefits and coverage through your place of employment, they recognize registered psychologists, which is
There you go.
what I am, for coverage. They do not cover mental health clinicians or counselors or social workers, or if they do cover social workers, that one's new. So generally speaking, if you're going to access psychological services, you want someone who has a registered psychologist credential. We have very unique specialized training that other counselors or therapists do not have. So that would be a really big qualifier.
Would it ever be written RP, shorthand? Or no?
RP, we would do R psych. So R
There you go.
period PSYCH.
That's what I was looking for. Perfect.
Yes.
So, if an individual is living an evolved life,
Yeah.
what does that look like?
Oh, I love this question. If they're living an evolved life, they're self-aware. They are taking very good care of themselves wholly, physically, emotionally, psychologically, spiritually, and they're having a lot of fun along the way.
That is beautiful. Thank you so much for being on the show.
Yeah,
Cinder.
you're welcome.
That
Thank you for
was-
having me.
Of course, that was just chock full of great information. So thank you
Awesome.
so much.
Well, you ask very good questions.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that.
Thank you.
Hey guys, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, I'd recommend that you subscribe to our channel at Evolution VN, and you can do so below. Each week, we'll be releasing a new information-packed interview, which will simplify your health and fitness and help you maximize your life. So, subscribe below to be notified whenever a new video is released. Until then, live an evolved life.